scripture reading is Mark 12:18 through 27. Then the Sadducees stepped forward, a group of men who say there is no resurrection. Here was their question. Teacher, Moses gave us a law that when a man dies without children, the man's brother should marry his widow and have children in his brother's name. Well, there were 7 brothers, and the oldest married and died and left no children. So the second brother married the widow, but soon he died too and left no children. Then the next brother married her and died without children, and so on until all were dead. And still there were no children, and last of all the woman died too. What we want to know is this. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? For she had been the wife of each of them. Jesus replied, Your trouble is that you don't know the Scriptures and don't know the power of God. For when these 7 brothers and the woman rise from the dead, they won't be married. They will be like the angels. But now, as to whether there will be a resurrection, have you never read in the book of Exodus about Moses and the burning bush? God said to Moses, I am the God of Abraham, and I am the God of Isaac, and I am the God of Jacob. God was telling Moses that these men, though dead for hundreds of years, were still very much alive, for he would not have said, I am the God of those who don't exist. You have made a serious error.
But that doesn't mean you can stop singing, because we have a little children's song to sing. You should know it. All right, come up here and help me. Come on. Take your hands out of your pockets. Smile for the cameras. All right, now you guys all got to sing this song too, because it's a very important song. It has a very important message. It goes like this. I just want to be a sheep, bah. Got that? That's really almost all the lyrics. I just want to be a sheep, bah, 'cause a sheep he will keep. Yeah. I just want to be a sheep, bah. Let's try it one more time. You got it now? All right. I just want to be a sheep, bah. I just want to be a sheep, bah, 'cause a sheep he will keep. Yeah. I just want to be a sheep, bah. Now it has a second verse. I don't want to be a Sadducee. I don't want to be a Sadducee, 'cause they're all sad, you see. I just want to be a sheep, bah. Good job. Well, today we're talking about the Sadducees and their problems. And they are sad, you see. That's how you remember them. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection, so they were all fair, you see. And the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, so they were all sad, you see. Right? That's how I got through seminary. Got to get the right answers on those questions. So we're talking about the Sadducees, and really they were sad. In fact, we know nothing about them except what was written by their enemies. And that's sad. They died out. There are no more. They didn't last past the temple. And really, they had a very pathetic, pitiable life because they did not believe in the resurrection. They come to them, to Jesus, and Mark introduces them as those who do not believe in the resurrection, which just sets the whole things that Jesus Christ has said in the book on ear, because Jesus has predicted his own resurrection 3 times. Now, if Jesus has predicted his own resurrection 3 times, and here come the Sadducees who don't believe in a resurrection, if they are able to prove him wrong, then Jesus is either a liar or a lunatic for believing such stuff, for spreading such falsehoods. So he really needs to answer this question about the resurrection. The Sadducees were a pro-priestly party. They were into power, and they were into the status quo, and they were into money, and they were into ruling, and they were in charge. They had a lot of influence for being such a small group of people. They only believed in the first 5 books of... There are only 5 books of Moses. They didn't believe in just the first 5 books of Moses. They believed in all the books of Moses, but there are 5 of them. And they just believed in those books and nothing else. If you couldn't show them in those first 5 books, if Moses didn't say it, they didn't believe it. I have a nephew who's going to a Bible college, a sort of Bible college, and they only want to teach about the teachings of Paul. They don't teach the Gospels. They don't teach John. They don't teach anything, James, none of that stuff. They just want Paul. Well, the Sadducees were a little bit like that. They only wanted Moses. You know, Moses said it. They believed it. Didn't care for anything else. And oddly enough, they had a conservative view of reading Scripture. Their way of reading Scripture was probably a whole lot more like ours than ours is like the Pharisees. The Pharisees thought that they could make up all kinds of things. You know, Moses crossing the Red Sea, that's a sign that what would that be a sign for? That God is going to lead us into the promised land, and no, that actually works. But the Pharisees made up all kinds of fantasies about Scripture. The Sadducees said, if it's not there, it ain't there. So they were actually a little conservative when it came to reading Scripture. Their philosophy of life is sort of summed up into something that was written about the same time. It goes like this: short and sorrowful is our life, and there's no remedy when a life comes to its end, and no one has been known to return from Hades. And there's some other things that were written about that same time about them, and they said stuff like, we shall be as though we had never been, and the spirit will dissolve like empty air, and there is no return from our death. They were sad, you see. The Sadducees come to Jesus and they try to bait him. You know, it's not that they said, you know, they didn't come and have a reasoned argument. They just had this case study that they had come up with. And evidently it had stumped a lot of people. It had to do with a thing called levirate marriage. And the levirate marriages were kind of things that helped the nation to survive and pass on their land, their inheritance. God had promised Abraham that the people of Israel would have land. And so this promise was enacted in ancient Israel by letting the families keep their land throughout the generations. You could not sell your land to anybody for very long. It always came back to you in 70 years. So you always ended up with your land. So that land had to stay with the families. But what happens if a family doesn't have any sons or any children to pass the land on to? Well, so Moses gave the children of Israel a commandment